Yeah.
Gentlemen, would you like to come up, please?
Oh, yeah, he's one of the speakers.
Just
Ladies and gentlemen, our final session is about to get underway. I have a wonderful panel of people to end what has been a remarkable meeting, I believe. And they are Tom Blees, President of the Science Council for Global Initiatives. He will talk to you, I know, about nuclear, particularly small nuclear, abandoned nuclear, ignored nuclear technologies crying to be taken up. Steve Gedima, I was very impressed with something I read by him, and it's so nice of him to come to our session. He's the Senior Vice President of Advanced Energy Economics. And Kim Costello, sitting right next to me here, he's the Principal Researcher at the National Regulatory Research Institute, and Kim, very highly recommended by an enormous number of people. And then I'm awfully pleased to have Edward Salzberg, who does some very interesting things. His organization is a Security and Sustainability Forum. I read about it, so it's press releases and announcements, and decided I better find out what it is. And one of the things that he does, which I think is very important, is he has wonderful webinars on critical issues about electricity, about energy, about water, and other aspects of how we live today and what we need to sustain a good and profitable life. The sustainability, security and sustainability forum, and that pretty well says the whole thing, and of course he will enlarge on that. I tend to do these things in the order in which they're printed because that's easiest. Tom Lees, President of the Science Council for Global Initiatives. Lead us off, please.
Thanks, Will. Before I started, just to thank the unsung heroes and heroines of this, the organizers, because I know it's a really big job to organize something like this. And I like to thank Llewellyn too, because of the way you put it together, where you left a lot of space for Q&A, because I think discussion of points that people are making is a really good thing. People should have to defend their assertions instead of just having, you know, pronouncements made from the stage and then everybody walks away. So I'm gonna introduce several ideas pretty quickly because I want to have a lot of time for Q&A. So forgive me if I go a little bit too fast. And anybody who wants the slides, you can get them later. What I'm going to look at is what we can see kind of peeking over the horizon for the next 10 years. I wrote a book called Prescription for the Planet back in 2008, and you can download it for free at that URL up on the top, or you can download it from our organization's website. Basically, it was a set of proposals for the deployment of cutting-edge technologies that most people had never heard about to solve some of the world's biggest problems. And it got the attention of Dr. Evgeny Belikov in Russia, who was one of Putin or one of Gorbachev's top advisors and has been. He's like the alpha dog in science. He was the person who started the project, the International Fusion Research Project, with the intent of producing unlimited clean energy for the whole planet. By the time my book came out, he was in his mid-70s, he would never live to see it, and then he realized that we could do it a different way, using fast reactor technology that the United States had developed up to that point. So he put together a conference of Russian and American scientists, and they came up with the idea for think tank made up primarily of scientists and cutting-edge technologies to try and make these things happen. And that was the origin of the Science Council for Global Initiatives, because all these scientists at the conference were PhD physicists and that sort of thing, which I was not. I said, well, I hope I can be in it. And they said, we don't want you to be in it, we want you to run it. So that's what I did. One of the technologies that, if you create a world where there's abundant cheap energy, you're going to create a situation where everybody's standard of living is rising, and you're going to end up with a situation where raw materials are going to be in greater and greater demand. And a lot of people have said that if you create that everybody in the world can't have the kind of lifestyle an American or European has, because we would need for Earths to provide that much natural resource. Well, that's not really true. It's the way we use our resources and reuse or don't reuse the resources. So one of the technologies that was developed by one of the members of our Science Council is called plasma conversion. And what it is it uses plasma torches to take waste products, all kinds of waste products, and you put it into this plasma burner. Now, the way we do recycling now is you count on people's behavior, conscientious behavior, to separate their garbage, and you can only recycle a few things. This is to recycle everything. It doesn't require human behavior. You put everything into the same dumpster, whether it's poopy diapers or nerve gas, and it all comes out. You recover all the oxygen, hydrogen, and carbon that comes out of it. And from that, you can make anything that we now make out of oil. So you'll be able to make plastics or whatever. But in the beginning, people are saying, well, we'll just burn this syngas and make electricity. If you do that with the carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, you have to put 20% of the electricity you make back into the system to run the plasma torches. 80% goes into the grid, and 80% efficiency is pretty good, especially when you're taking it from garbage. So if we use these instead of making landfills, to produce about 5% of the electricity that is currently used on the planet. So that's something that utility companies are definitely going to want to be looking at in the future. Now, in my book, I propose that we make commercial scale versions of this. At the time, it hadn't happened. Now there is one. It's over in England. It's in the final stages of its shakedown. They're building the second one, and the company Air Products, a big multinational company, plans to make this a big profit center for themselves. The other product you get a molten slag that comes out of this thing, and from that you can make building materials very cheaply, and it's very inert, so you can make tiles and bricks and road beds and that sort of thing. If we do this all over the world, we're going to have way cheap building materials all over the planet, and we're going to have even more than we need. So some other uses for it would be to make reef balls. You could just basically pour this molten slag into molds like this and create artificial reefs in areas where the reefs have been dying, where they're destroyed or whatever, and you greatly increase the fish carrying capacity, and especially in developing countries where fishermen are, one guy with a boat, that can make a big difference in the livelihoods and increased health of people who live in developing countries. You also have an issue with the great seas of plastic that people have probably heard about in the ocean gyres. And the way you get rid of the great seas of plastic is you don't go out and scoop it up, because it's impossible. It's too spread around. It's up and down through the water table, through the surface water. You have to get it at its source, and its source is third world nations primarily who don't have garbage structure. This is a river in Jakarta, Indonesia, and this guy's he's going through the plastic that's floating in the river. That's what happens. People don't have the infrastructure. They dump their garbage into the rivers taken into the oceans, and then ends up in the gyres. So what this is going to do is it's going to make garbage a really highly profitable business, enough so that companies can go in and create the garbage infrastructure and solve the problem at source. Now, another technology that I think you're going to be seeing is electric heavy vehicles. A friend of mine is a very successful trucking company in Minnesota, and he was always frustrated with the ups and downs of diesel prices. So he designed an electric semi. It uses lithium iron batteries, which are 100% recyclable. And unlike lithium ion, they're also thermodynamically stable. He has 14 battery bags like this, and each one has 20 batteries in it. He gets 155 miles on a half-hour charge with a fully loaded semi. And with new battery technologies that are coming around the corner, he's expecting within a year or two to get it up over 300, which will be a complete game changer. In my book, I'd written about a different type of vehicle technology that would work most likely, but it's going to be much more practical if we can have electric vehicles. And I think you'll see either these life batteries, lithium iron batteries, which I don't know why nobody's taken the LIFE acronym and given a trademark to it, but I think you'll see these technologies taking off very quickly. This is what he charges his trucks with right now. You basically would just have to do some wiring, but we have obviously an electricity infrastructure to do this. Now, this is for Bob Murray. I was hoping that I could convince him that climate change is a real issue. And as you can see, anytime you do a chart or a graph, sometimes the data gets so small that you can't see it at the end. So this only goes up to 1990. This again, there's a URL at the bottom of this. This is an article, in all seriousness, to people like Bob, an article called "The New Abolitionism," and what Chris Hayes is saying in this article is the only time that anybody in the United States history has ever been asked to abandon a resource on such a vast scale was during the Civil War, when slavery was supposed to be abolished. At the time, the value of slaves was 16% of the national economy, but that value was geographically very concentrated in the South, where it represented half of the South's wealth. And so what he's saying is, compared to then, the value was about $10 trillion, actually 20 trillion, but he's being conservative. So he says, okay, $10 trillion. So we're asking fossil fuel companies to leave $10 trillion of wealth in the ground. And he's not making a moral comparison between slavery and fossil fuels. People might make that comparison otherwise, but it's an extremely thought-provoking article, and I would certainly encourage anyone to take a look at it. Okay, so how do we create a world that produces enough power so that everybody can enjoy it and is environmentally benign? Some people talk about energy efficiency, but you can see this graph basically shows that if everybody in the United States started using half as much energy as we use now, but everybody else on the planet used the same amount of energy as we would in 2050, this is how much energy we would need. So you can see that if we want to look at a just world with energy egalitarianism, conservation is a really good thing, energy efficiency is a really good thing, but it is definitely not a solution. So the question is, can we get it from wind and solar? And there's a lot of people that think we can. So Google, which is considered to be a very environmentally conscientious company, decided they would figure out how to make renewable energy cheaper than coal. And they invested, by some accounts, almost $1 billion, hired lots of high-powered PhDs to study the issue, and to see if they could make renewable energy cheaper than coal. And after 4 years, they quit the project. And they said, not only do we find that we can't, but we discovered that after looking at all the different types of technologies, not just wind and solar, but geothermal and tidal and waves and high-flying kites, that renewable energies alone cannot power modern civilization. And so then the question is it true? There's three of my colleagues from Australia have put together a meta study, basically, because there's kind of a cottage industry of people that are trying to convince the world that we can run on 100% renewables, and these guys decided they would take a look at that. They're going to release this at COP21. I don't know that if you email me sometime around that time at the end of this month, I should be able to provide you with it. Okay, so I'm going to have to go through this fast. This is a website. Oops, you can't quite see it. That shows the solar energy output of Germany at any time for any day. You can go back and look at it, and it looks really good. You can see the little blue thing up on top that shows the amount of electricity being put up. But a lot of days it looks like this, and a lot of weeks in the wintertime it looks like this. So that even if Germany had 100 times as many solar panels as they do now, it still wouldn't be enough to power the country. But of course, they have the Czech Republic and France with ready supplies of nuclear power that they can just run into Germany on weeks like that. Battery storage isn't going to make it either. And wind, of course, you can't count on wind being there when the sun isn't there, because the wind is too erratic. So if you're looking at stopping the use of fossil fuels, which most anti-nuclear people and most environmentalists say we have to do, the choices are very limited for so-called backup to wind and solar. You have either nuclear or hydro, and hydro is definitely limited in itself. Something we see in California with the drought there, where our reservoirs are nearly empty, so nuclear is it. So the United States basically put its nuclear chips on a technology called the integral gas reactor back in the 80s, and they had over $1 billion research program to try and solve all the problems associated with nuclear power. this is a very simplified version, but it is a quite simple system. And unlike nuclear power plants that are in use today, it operates at atmospheric pressure, which alone creates a safety margin that's hard to beat. You can read about this technology in my book. I got it forms the basis for a lot of what's in the book. It uses a recycling technology for fuel recycling. The project was canceled in 1994 for purely political reasons, right when they were getting ready to design the commercial scale version of this fuel recycling facility, which would basically solve the nuclear waste problem. Our organization managed to restart that project about 3 years ago, and I can tell you that it's in the second stage now. The Department of Energy is involved with it, and we basically have the solution to nuclear waste. It's very simple to recycle it. On the right, you see the kind of complexity of the recycling system, the reprocessing system France uses, called mixed oxide fuel. On the left is the pyroprocessing system that we would use with this, which could be put into a large garage. Now, we know that the population of the Earth is probably going to be 9.5 to 10 billion people by the middle of the century. We're looking at a huge problem just providing water for another 3 billion people, plus all the people that are water stretched today. And that's going to take a huge amount of energy. This is California, where we have 100 miles of aqueducts and pumping stations. We're going to have to do this on a scale hitherto unimaginable, and it's going to take a huge amount of electricity. The water system in California is the biggest consumer of electricity in California, and I think somebody else was saying earlier today it's a similar thing elsewhere. Okay, so basically the PRISM reactor is the commercial scale version of the integral fast reactor. General Electric holds the most of the intellectual property on this. They've been working on it since 1994, optimizing all the system. And it's a modular reactor. It's meant to be built in factories and plunked into the ground. Now, there's another system. A lot of people have been talking about thorium reactors, lifters, liquid fluoride thorium reactors, and several startup companies have started. Matter of fact, yesterday I heard about another one. But most of these companies are started by young people fresh out of college with nuclear engineering degrees, or people who don't have experience in building. This company, Thorcon, was started by a shipbuilder, a guy who built the world's greatest ship. And you can see it didn't take long to build, and it didn't cost much money, $89 million. A 1 gigawatt Thorcon plant using the type of reactors that we would use would just take the center part of that ship. So this shipbuilder put together a group of nuclear engineers and nuclear physicists and came up with this technology that's based on Oak Ridge National Laboratory experiment, where they ran a reactor for 3 years. It's the basis for all the thorium reactors that you hear about, or most of them anyway. And it's basically a pot that's full of graphite. This is the actual Oak Ridge one. Alvin Weinberg, who was the head of Oak Ridge at the time, and who was actually helped start the light water reactor commercial era, always thought this would be the better system. And so basically, you have all this graphite sitting in that pot, and it has channels in it, and liquid salt that has uranium or plutonium dissolved in it runs up through there. The graphite acts as a moderator, and it heats up. The atoms split. And then it runs up into a pump where you have the one moving part of the system, an impeller, and it pumps the liquid at a very low pressure. It basically operates at atmospheric pressure and runs it through a heat exchanger. It's an extraordinarily safe system. And the reason why I was attracted to the Thorcon guys is because these guys are industrialists. Unlike all the thorium companies, they're not planning on some breakthrough to be able to make it work. They're going to use off-the-shelf parts. They're going to build them in modules at South Korean shipyards, which are the world's most sophisticated shipyards, and use shipbuilding techniques. And they believe that they can put this together for the first two, a half a gigawatt. Each module would be 250 megawatts. A half a gigawatt, the first two, they figure they can build them for $1,400 a kilowatt. which is extraordinarily cheap. And ultimately, what's going to drive new nuclear technology is not going to be the utility companies saying, well, we really want to fix climate change. What's going to drive it is, I don't care how conscientious you are, if you own a utility company, you're liable to your shareholders and you got to look at your bottom line. What's going to drive it is economics. And if you can build nuclear reactors and mass produce them for $1,400 a kilowatt, you're going to come in under gas, coal, everything else, because the fuel is trivial. The fuel cost is trivial. Now, can we do it fast enough? I had the opportunity to get to know all the people who designed the PRISM reactor from the get-go, and I had asked several of them, would you consider building a PRISM, which is a relatively simple system, as easy as building a heavy bomber in World War II? They said, oh, easier. So in 1945, the U.S. produced 6,700 heavy bombers and super heavy bombers. If you produce 6,700 PRISM reactors, you would produce as much electricity as the entire world produced in 2009 from all sources. So there's no question that we could build them fast enough. Actually, the limiting factor is going to be the startup fuel, and that's where the Thorcon reactor comes in, because you can use less enriched uranium for running a Thorcon reactor. We can see that in 11 years, France, using old technology with pressurized reactors, went from 20% to 80% nuclear in 11 years. Actually, they doubled their electricity demand at that time, so they, in fact, went from 10 to 80%. So this can be done, most definitely. So the nice thing about the marriage of the fast reactor technology with the Thorcon technology is that you can process the spent fuel that comes out of a Thorcon reactor using essentially the same recycling system as you use with the fast reactor. So, so this is something that can be built relatively quickly. GE could start building PRISM reactors right now. As a matter of fact, the UK is getting very close to deciding to use it. The Thorcon reactor, the Thorcon group signed an MOU with Indonesia and said that we can build these in 4 years, and commercial scale version. And unlike the United States, where the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is extraordinarily Byzantine and takes billions of dollars and God knows how many decades to do something truly revolutionary like this, the Indonesian government said 4 years. Can you do it in 3? So, so it's highly likely that you will see within 5 years the Thorcon reactor system being available for an extraordinarily attractive price and being able to be built very quickly. So anyway, there's our website if you want to check this out, or if you want to contact me for whatever reason. I would encourage you to look at the site. There's some other books besides mine that are also available for free, so you can find out about some of the cutting edge nuclear technology.
Thank you, Tom. Now we're going to Steve Jadima. And Steve, you're closer to the today rather than the tomorrow in California, working with disruptive or new technology, or sort of whatever they're calling it at the moment. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ron. So I'm with a group called Advanced Energy Economy, and I'm sure most of you are unfamiliar, but we are a business trade association. Our members include a wide range of technologies, as the name might imply, everything from solar and wind and biofuels and electric vehicles and energy efficiency and demand response and on and on and on and on. All of them contributing toward moving us to a low carbon, no carbon energy future. We were founded on the basic idea that no one of these technologies is large enough on its own to stand up to the powerful incumbent technologies that exist, and no one of them is capable of solving problems alone. That the real value in combining our voices is to both address the breadth of issues, but also amass a large enough economic power that we can demand a seat at the table and be a part of the conversation. When I heard Tom Bannon talk about this prosperity agenda, the, you know, the agenda of abundance, and moving off of the agenda of constraints. A vision of a prosperous world running on clean, secure, affordable energy. That's exactly what our tagline is. But we have a very different vision about how you get there. And one of the ways, or the collection of ways that we know we can get there via is a set of technologies that are available today. I think that these future technologies are incredibly promising, and one of the things that we take great pains to do in helping to push for changes in public policy is to not go down the path that we currently find ourselves in, which is a very siloed, single technology focused incentive programs like the wind production tax credit or the solar investment tax credit, but to create opportunities for all these technologies and new unimagined technologies to thrive once they come along. Just to go on a policy tangent for a second, I'll get back to the technologies. But one of the things that we feel very strongly about is that there should be a role for government to play in promoting technologies. But the question is what? And I've had a lot of conversations with a number of members of Congress. We are a national organization. We work in 25 states. I happen to run our California effort, which is our largest, but we do work in a wide variety of states and at the federal level. And in talking with many members of Congress, particularly on the Republican side, we found enormous agreement with a few set of basic principles, which is that there is a role for government. That the government's role in energy policy should be to promote innovation. That whatever is promoted should be technology neutral, and that over time, as technologies improve and become commercially viable, that whatever incentives or subsidies or whatever programs are put in place to help these folks get past that initial hump of being completely out of the market. Once they start to mature, that you give them a known glide path off of these subsidies. And the interesting thing was that most of in fact, all of the people that I talked to on the Republican side of the aisle said, wow, this is the first time we've ever had a group come to us and say they didn't want to live off the public trough forever. And I think that's part of the key to this, is finding ways to incentivize new technologies, provide them an opening so that they aren't up against the enormous economic power of the existing technologies. If they've got a better idea, they may be out of the money now, but over time, they actually will be able to compete. So what are the technologies that are currently available and can compete very effectively? I didn't bring slides, but I would invite you to go to our website. It's aee.net. It's very easy to find. But in the resources tab, we have a huge number of publications that we've issued over the last 2 or 3 years that can help guide whatever issue it is that you think you're facing. We commissioned the Brattle Group to do a study on reliability of intermittent resources, reliability of renewable energy resources in bringing large quantities of those onto the grid. So again, a group, we personally commissioned a group that was well known and loved by utilities and regulators, so that it wouldn't be perceived as a hatchet job by the industries that stand to benefit. But I think you'll find there that there's a lot of good information that can help inform decisions, whether you're a regulator or a utility, as you move forward in trying to particularly trying to comply with the Clean Power Plan. Now, on that specific topic, at the EPA's request, we actually produced a booklet, if you will, about a year ago now, which I actually don't know what the official title is. I call it the 40 Technologies Report, but it's a one-pager on each of 40 different technologies, ranging from solar and efficiency and biofuels and on and on and on. that explains the technologies that are available today and are cost effective. So again, on the notion that you're going to be working toward CPP compliance, regardless of whether you're going to wait and see what the feds come up with, or you're going to craft your own plan, there are a huge stable of technologies that are available to you to help meet those goals. We are about ready to produce an updated version of that that's sort of independent of the CPP, but that'll get you started. And you know, what's interesting to me about all these is that there are companies, both large and small, that are ready to deliver these technologies. I know that some of the additional commentary here today is going to be around things like demand response and efficiency. You know, I really beg to differ with Tom on the whole efficiency thing, and I do recognize your observation that efficiency alone isn't going to get us there. But one of the most interesting things that I think many of you may know, but bears repeating, in pardon my being California centric for just a moment, but in California we've had flat electricity consumption on a per capita basis for 40 years. So during that 40-year period of time, all of these electronic devices that people love to plug into a wall, Netflix, for those of us that use Netflix, air conditioning. 40 years ago, the vast majority of people didn't have air conditioning in California. Now it's pretty much a must if you're going to construct a home. Despite all of this enormous increase in demand for electricity, the actual consumption of electricity has remained flat. Why? Again, you know, it may run counter to your philosophical bent, but because we've taken a very relatively heavy hand in government in forcing far more efficient appliances, far better building standards, far efficient air conditioning systems. We're even looking at things like personal computers and how much energy they demand, and what happens when you leave them plugged in all night. So, you know, it may seem a little draconian at times to an outside observer, but as a resident, it has absolutely no bearing. The quality of life is amazing, and in fact, we use so much less electricity. And people say, well, yes, but the result has been, especially with the increasing amount of renewables that we have in California. We have a huge amount of renewable energy in California. That the electricity rates are so high. Well, that's true. On a per kilowatt hour basis, our electricity rates are higher than most parts of the country. But look at people's electricity, normalize them for differences in weather and climate. So it's happening as well. You live in the sunshine. Lots of California doesn't live in the sunshine, or they live in too much sunshine. On a normalized basis, people actually pay less for their electricity in California as a bill, their total bill, than they do in other parts of the country, because we use our electricity so much more efficiently. So while I admire Tom's desire to produce electricity more efficiently, the solution is not get people to use more electricity. You can have an amazing lifestyle without having to use more electricity in the process. So, and how do you do that? It is through this range of technologies. So I'm happy to talk about anything, probably say just for Q&A about specific things, but you know, we have an electric vehicle initiative in California, for example. We want to put 1.5 million electric vehicles on the road by 2025. We're on the way there, but we're by no means, you know, close. And that's going to be both a boom and a bane for the electricity system. It's going to create a lot of additional demand. At the same time, it's going to create a lot of opportunities, particularly in a state where, and I can't even remember the last time I went to an energy-related conference that somebody didn't put up that damn depth chart. So it's like, we're going to be in a situation where some of that demand in the middle of the day, it can be taken up by charging, by workplace charging, by people charging the vehicles at the right time. I think the technology that's going to be more interesting is the one mentioned earlier today, which is storage. Being able to basically ship supply. There's this combination of demand and shipping supply, so you ship load into the time periods that you normally have told people to avoid. So do run your pool pump in the middle of the afternoon in the summertime. That's a great time because we have an abundance of solar energy on the grid. Don't necessarily charge your car in the middle of the night. There may not be enough electricity at that point in time. So trying to come up with the right, again, this is another technology solution, but the right information technologies, the right price signals, and the right communications devices. I've heard Nest mentioned several times today that I think as much as they are specifically interesting, they're also a good code word for the general idea of two-way communication between the home and the grid. And those technologies can also help, particularly those of you who are at utilities, to be able to balance your load so that you can communicate signals and create a flatter load profile, so that you don't need to fire up those peaker plants. So I think we do have an invisibly carbon reduction, focus of carbon reduction. I'm raised in here, but I missed the speech this morning, but I've heard it many times before. But I was also very surprised, not too surprised, but Tom's insistence that coal was a huge thing. The problem is that when you look at all of those, you look at just the benefits and not the drawbacks of coal, you come away with a very warped picture of what is possible. It is possible to live without coal. And yes, there are issues with communities that currently rely on coal. But dividing out the folks that mine coal versus the folks that use coal to generate electricity, substituting natural gas for coal doesn't mean that all the jobs related to that coal-fired plant go away. They just shifted into another spot. There is a problem with folks who mine coal, but we had the same problem, if you recall, with tobacco a few years ago. And there was a lot of hemming and hawing about what are we going to do with all the tobacco farmers. But if we use that same mentality that we're talking about with coal and applied it back then, we'd all be smoking like chimneys. And that's not a really good solution. It's a bit of a stretch for an analogy, but the point really here is there are technologies that are out there today that can greatly reduce our reliance on CO2 producing energy technologies and not have to sacrifice quality of life and not have to curb the economic growth potential of the United States. So I strongly encourage you to think about these things. Again, we are more than willing to work with you. We work with a lot of the public utilities commissions. The purpose of our writing that paper was not for them, actually. It was for the air regulators, because one of the interesting facts about this is that the CPP was written to be implemented at the state level by air regulators. And almost none of them were familiar with the technologies that you are all completely familiar with. So we didn't write this for the public utilities commissioners, we wrote it for the air regulators. And for a lot of them, it was an eye-opener. But now, as we've seen here, very consistent theme, we saw a couple of weeks ago with NERU, very consistent theme is everyone is now starting to think about compliance. And I think that if there's a message I can leave with you today, it's that there are dozens of technologies out there that together can provide you a very cheap alternative to what your current mix as you work toward these carbon goals, carbon reduction goals, because these carbon reduction goals are critical. We've been at this now for ExxonMobil's, infamous initiation into this research in the 70s. So we've been 40 years putting this off, and this isn't a matter of trying to find a nice balance. The balance has been tilted in the other direction for 40 years, and it's time to you really do have to pay attention to this. So I think again, to quote Tom, he's full of analogies, so I can grab another one of his. The waves are coming. The waves are crashing on the beach, and there's no point in trying to figure out how to stop them. The point is to figure out how to take advantage of them. And I think you've got the technologies here, and I'd love to work with you on adapting them. So.
Thank you very much, Steve. And now we'll go to Edward, who runs webinars on these issues and others. What have you learned there?
Thanks, Llewellyn, for inviting me. I'm not the energy expert that many of you are. I do run webinars on a variety of issues. I do have a technical background, so I'm not really ignorant about the issues. But I did put a few slides together because I do two things. I do run the Security and Sustainability Forum, about 14,000 followers. We cover issues related to climate solutions, climate risk. We just ran a webinar today on national security and climate. I think it went pretty well. I sat there and didn't have to run it, kind of tapped in on it. We do a lot of work with Arizona State University, their branches here, and I appreciate his support for the webinars that we run. I just ask you to go to our site, the Security and Sustainability Forum. You can click around there. Everything up there is free. I also bring some technical experience in the area too, because I am an officer group. Building Energy Solutions is a national company. We do work in New York State and also California, so states around. We're involved in New York Plus, which is the direct program. And we do a lot of work directly for utilities. Let me just move quickly through this. I'm gonna try to do two things. First of all, provide a little bit of context, and then bring some of the background that I've had into the discussion about technologies. Focusing not only on the technologies themselves, but the barriers to implementation, and maybe rolling in some of the regulations that are necessary, or policy principles that are necessary, and maybe break down those barriers and get things moving a little bit more quickly. With technologies, there's a lot of them out there, and I bump into them quite a lot because we've been working on microgrids. Since we're working on New York Prize, there's a lot of friends interested in how fast we're moving, whether those microgrids are going to be coming into the design phase or not. So we see technologies quite a lot, especially on IT integration, dashboards, demand response kinds of programs. But what I really observe is that the key barrier to success is not inadequate technologies. Never has been in this country. It's really tardy adoption of those technologies, which is why I want to focus a bit on barriers to implementation, and actually on both sides of the grid interface, both on the demand side and then also on the supply side. The customers aren't really interested in electrons. They're interested in quality of life and economic vitality. I think we might have heard that a few times here. And I did a presentation with DOE on the loan guarantee program, something that I know something about, because it's being extended over into microgrids and energy and 21st century call it also distributed energy. And I put a slide together about the benefits of microgrids, and then I look back and it was sort of the same slide as the benefits of the grid itself, the larger grid itself. So price stability, resilience, sustainability, all of these different things that the grid provides, these benefits, except microgrids lacks one thing, and that's equity. And the microgrid was the first utility, and it wasn't an equity situation. It was a JP Morgan could afford to put in, could afford to light his plant, and so Thomas Edison developed the microgrid for him. But the grid itself grew up to a large extent because of the equity issues, getting affordable energy out into the population. And that's one thing that microgrids really don't do as much in favor of microgrids. This chart I just pulled out and I used it in the DOE presentation because I think it puts all of the pieces together as to why we're really talking about the next generation utility. It's because there are threats to the utilities we have now, to the grid that we have now. It's an aging grid. It's inefficient in a lot of ways. It's losing energy. It's under threat from climate and other impacts. And distributed energy resources, microgrids, new grid technologies really are kind of the way to the future. When you get the slides, the reference for that is on there somewhere. And focusing on the grid interface is an area that we're focusing on now a little bit, but I think where a lot of the innovation is taking place. And we've talked about innovation here throughout this conference. I think it's been a really good discussion. Most of it, I think, has been on that interface. And I also want to extend that to the power generation side, too, because I think innovation there is really critical for a number of reasons, and I can't remember what order I'm in. So let me just run through this quickly. I think microgrids make sense for this reason. We've got a lot of weather events, and we have to do something about that. If the utility itself could protect us completely, then I say that would be a great way to go. But we have some very expensive disasters, and as a result of that, we have to make some decisions as to what we're going to invest in the future as a country in order to protect both the population from outages, but also to protect the integrity of the infrastructure itself from large-scale events and other kinds of attacks. And it's expensive. The increase in outages because of weather events is really kind of driving what I would say is really the cause of some of the main drivers of why we're talking about a new grid. There are other vectors that are impacting it as well. Reduced growth in the energy usage for a lot of reasons. But I think this is a major factor from my standpoint. I don't think microgrids are the answer. First of all, I took a Navigant slide to give you permission to use this one. The lower line is the minimum rate of adoption of microgrids over the next 2020, and the top one is the aggressive. And I think the DOE is trying to move that line from the lower one up to the top one. But if you look at the numbers there, it feels like 8,000 megawatts, total megawatts. I mean, that's a drop in the bucket. So you have to have a tremendous increase in microgrids for it to make a huge difference. And if you just sort of take a look at energy capacity in the United States now, we're talking about 1 million megawatts. So microgrids aren't going to get us to where we need to be, and I think neither will renewable energy, or either the deployment of solar at grid scale and also wind at grid scale is about a tenth of what we need now. So there has to be great increases in the scaling of those technologies. Not that they don't work and they can be used in a lot of places, but we've got a scaling issue here in order to replace the legacy systems that we have. So I started the slide by talking about, in my notes over here, renewable energy. And then after listening to the last 2 days, I crossed that out and I changed it to low carbon. Because I think we're on a pathway to a low carbon future. And along that pathway, we've got to be careful of what we kind of X out and say this isn't going to work. We're not going to get off coal that fast. We're not going to get off gasoline for cars that fast. We are on a pathway to a low carbon future, maybe a no carbon future. And our job really is to figure out what those pathways are, so that, and what those alternative fuel sources are that we're going to be investing in over the next several years to get us there. So I'm in favor of gasification now and 21st century coal, nuclear. I think we've got to look at all of those things in our pathway forward, while renewable energy becomes cheaper and more scalable. So, I want to just talk about innovation. So there's innovation, there's a lot of variety of innovations. We talk about technology and improvements in technology, and Tom and others here know that field better than I do. But there's also innovations in decision frameworks and configuration, and the way we look at power sources as well. So I'm going to spend just a second or two on this. The Edison, I pulled this out from the Edison Foundation, and this was just a whole list of utility investment or innovations. And what I liked about this one is it broke it all down into sort of finite areas, grid edge optimization. So I'm thinking about technology. Well, I can think about investment in grid edge optimization, investment in grid, my eyes are too old, resiliency, reliability, and restoration. It's a nice framework for investment overall. It's all on the grid integration and demand side. And I think we also want to put up on this chart another one, on the slide, another, which is on the generation side. Wilden has been working with the Galvin Center at Lower Institute of Technology, looking at that interface and looking at smart appliances and how you put them together. One of the innovations that we've been looking at, and of course, you can then stage your demand so that when prices are low, you can use more electricity, all of that. But also we've been looking at systems, let's get to it. So looking at aggregation of systems, so this is on the residential side. So looking at ways to really reduce the costs and also increase demand response and the ability to maybe do some frequency regulation and contribute into the grid by aggregating across housing developments and other developments. And that integration is really kind of difficult because electrons are just sort of like, they don't always work the way you want them to. So there's a lot of integration work has to be done there overall. For New York Prize, we're looking at some ways to optimize the decision making, and so that we're tying those microgrid alternatives back to the amount of money a municipality has and to invest in it. And so I'd like the plug and play discussion yesterday that the fellow one of the unis talked about. That sounds really pretty innovative. It's along the lines of what we're thinking too. Plug and play gives you a chance to get a baseline investment in, and then add to it as you go further. Also looking at how you value resilience. There's no price on resilience right now. How do you put a price on resilience? So we're looking at ways to do that in terms of the number of days of storage that maybe, or number of days of islanding that a microgrid could provide is maybe a measure of the efficiency of that. But these kinds of decision tools I think are important going forward. I don't claim we've got just sort of some thoughts about how we make decisions going forward, I think are really critical in the overall technology discussion. Okay, so utility scale process technologies. Well, there's innovations in all areas of power generation, transmission, and environmental mitigation. And the breaking down barriers to investments in innovation here seems to me to be critical, especially if we believe that renewables are not going to be scalable fast enough to make a big enough difference to bend the temperature curve and drop carbon dioxide and meet some of the goals that we be talking about 21. So investments in these areas are really going to be necessary so that we have new kinds of power generation that can meet environmental goals and maybe are so efficient that they maybe reduce the investments necessary in transmission. So governments and innovation barriers are an issue, I think, from a regulatory standpoint, maybe could be dealt with. High uncertainty costs don't play well towards utilities. The regulators, the PUCs, are not going to start to approve things that look like they're very high cost because that's going to drive up the price of electricity. uncertain economic benefits for investing in new technologies on the power side. Challenges of maybe not being able to spread those costs over a wider base, maybe through interstate cooperation, and then maybe the diffuse social benefits in nature of some of those innovations, where there's a free rider problem, one utility, one community pays for innovation, and almost anyone can use it, so there's that issue there. So there are federal policy, state policy, public utility commission changes that are probably necessary to break down those barriers. And maybe thinking of them that way might get some action going so that maybe more pilots can be done that test nuclear, that test new carbon capture technologies, maybe utilization and development of drop-in fuels that can then recycle the carbon back into the economy, and maybe the integration between the power system, electrical power system, and mobile sources of fuel. Okay. So just a few ideas here, joint ownership, and these aren't mine, I pulled them out of a report, but they did make sense to me, so I just wanted to put them up there. So pathways forward for things regulators have done or could be doing, or capturing the added benefits of innovation, aligning the innovation premium with the widespread benefits of the innovation, making those who are benefiting pay for that. Joint ownership, which does spreads it out. And then maybe portfolio standards that, and I don't mean renewables in this case, but portfolio standards for certain types of coal might break us through to get some support for the scaled part of the regeneration. Okay. I want to make just a couple of final points. Shift to low carbon and DER because of physical and cybersecurity uncertainty, about environmental regs, price volatility, I think is really critical. Environmental regulations are changing. We want to place our bets in a way that we can adjust to those going forward. We should be betting on resources, sources, where the likelihood over time is that their cost is going to reduce rather than go up, which is why I think that renewables really do make a lot of sense. Investment over time, renewables have been coming down, going to continue to come down, whereas hydrogen, methane and natural gas is low now, but is not necessarily going to be low in the future. The customer is changing, and we've heard that here several times. I think if we were to start with the forces impinging on the utilities, which are technology, flattening demand, environmental regulation, history really shows that we can't stop innovation, and shifting to more efficient use of resources, if they are properly priced, is really critical. Innovation squeezes more power out of, it really squeezes more work out of each unit of power. And that means power demand growth is going to continue to slow. It's just human nature to do this, to reduce costs. As I said, customers don't care about electrons, they care about quality of life and economic vitality, which is kind of a clue in a way as to what the utility could be. The utility could be the innovation platform for the energy production and distribution of the future. Folks in IT, security, fuel source experts, maybe systems dynamics as a way to make decisions. A system of customer-based, integrated, islanded, distributed, low-carbon vision kind of lowers the risk of innovation. So I've just been reading about starting at the customer side and planning investments and planning the way the utility is going to be operating in the future, planning from the customer side back up. I'm trying to reduce the need for long-term investments, and I think Tom had said that at lunch too. If you've got a long-term investment but a short-term price horizon, you can really get a problem there. So I think that's where energy efficiency and renewable energies really do come in quite a lot. But the utilities have great assets, and it makes no sense to try to look for other places to get those assets. 100% market penetration, information on customer energy use, billing efficiency, 100% communication reach, trained blue-collar workers and trucks in most communities, good credit ratings, the ability to attract and deploy capital, public supervision, and public trust. It's a tremendous asset that should be built upon. So, but the overriding question, which I think maybe takes another session to address, is how do we pay for that transition into a more performance-based and systems-based, systems optimization-based future for the utilities, if you were to believe everything that you've heard over the last couple of days, which I thought all made a great deal of sense. How do you pay for that? Because the pricing model doesn't support it, so there needs to be a new pricing model based on maybe not use of how many electrons you sell, but on something having to do with efficiency of operation and quality of services, which means new state programs in order to support that. And then finally, what about all of those assets that if we move into this kind of a future where new systems, new communications, new IT is really dropping the need for sunk investments in power plants, say power plants of the past rather than power plants of the future, how are we going to compensate that utility which made those investments in the public interest and still has a mandate for the public interest as it moves into a new future? So I'd say that is maybe the big question for the utilities. And I probably talked too long, but I was hoping I could make one or two points that might have been different than you or add to the conversation going forward.
Thank you very much, Ed. And last but certainly not least, Ken Costello, who is the principal researcher at the National Railway Research Institute. You might just tell us what is the Institute.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here, and I learned a lot the last couple of days. The National Regulatory Research Institute is a nonprofit organization that serves all the state public utility commissions around the country. So the perspective I'm coming from this afternoon is I'm an economist. My advocacy is with regard to the public interest, and from sort of a regulatory perspective. I'm not a technology expert. We try to do this afternoon is sort of offer some observations to what's been said the last couple of days on technology and other related matters. And in part because I'm an economist, I'm sort of a contrarian. I mean, that's sort of part of my job is working for the state regulatory bodies. So the first point I want to make is there's like several drivers of new technology. Certainly public policy with regard to the environment and other policies of DOEs and the government has driven technology. Historically, if you look across spectrum of different technologies, a motive is customer driven. What do customers demand? Customers sort of identify something they want, and then sort of the entrepreneurs go and try to invent something and provide them with with that new want. Another motive is rent seeking. And truthfully, basically, I see a state regulatory proceedings where different groups are trying to exploit regulation to gain favors on their behalf, which more times than not is not in public interest. So my message to regulators is that when you have different groups promoting a certain technology, you have to make sure that those technologies are in the public interest. In ideology too, I see a lot of that going on. I live in New Mexico, and there's an intervener in a regulatory proceeding that's said that there's social justice when we do all we can to reduce carbon and CO2. And sort of the problem with that is that, when people are sort of, base their arguments on sort of moral imperatives, it's hard to argue. I mean, they're sort of, they draw a bright line between, what's right and what's wrong. And, my experience in this area of years is most things are in a gray area. Reasonable people could disagree. So I sort of a message to the regulators. When you look at the history of technologies in different industries, whether it's energy or non-energy, they take decades before they become widely dispersed. For example, the steam engine, it took 100 years between when it was invented and when it became widely dispersed. So a lot of these technologies, that we see sort of emerging, that it's going to take a lot of time. But sort of the message is maybe for the regulators and the utilities is that maybe they don't have to act quickly upon sort of, making decisions that affect these new technologies. There is usually a long process where you go from basic research to apply, demonstration, and then, wide diffusion. In a lot of technologies, they start off very primitive, but through extra refinement and experimentation, the costs are reduced, and eventually they enter the market on a broad basis. But more times than not, new technologies that start out promising fizzle out. They never developed. And there's a lot of examples of that across not only energy but in other industries as well. Sort of as an economist, I think the best approach to new technology development is to have competition between alternative technologies rather than subsidies. There's been some discussion of subsidies. As an economist, car-carrying economist, I don't have a car, but economists generally disfavor subsidies. And one reason is that a lot of times subsidies sort of continue. Maybe there was a initial rationale for the subsidy, but then, when the government tries to get rid of it, then it's there's a lot of opposition, and they last longer. And there's also other problems with with subsidies. In the value of technologies not only depends on their vendors, but also how they're used. Generally, utilities aren't inventors of new technologies, right? They're users, they're consumers. And it's important that, they take a technology and to adapt it, to their needs and to be able to, to exploit all the benefits from that. And sort of going back to the other, and we know from history too, a lot of new technologies survive until there are subsidies. They start out with a subsidy, and then when the subsidy is eliminated, they no longer become viable. Now, I'm not sure, again, which of the technologies which we're seeing now, some of which are receiving subsidies, will fizzle out once, subsidies are eliminated. In terms of technology in today's dialogue, certainly you've heard in this session and yesterday, there's a wide array of new technologies in the electric industry. The obsession seems to be with solar and wind. But we also have smart grids and, modernization, smart meters, information communication technologies that the utilities can exploit to their benefit. In one way, I think sort of what economists have sort of been advocating for years is that utilities could provide, if they could provide differentiated service to customers, that would be good. In other words, you got customers who, value reliability more than other customers. And, if there's some way feasibly you could provide higher reliability to those customers and charge them a higher price, that could be to the advantage of the utility. When you look at the airlines, they finally learned how to, create new value services where they're making money. In most industries too, when you provide basic service, the profit margins are low, but when they provide specialized services, like auto industry, if you buy a sort of a stripped down car, the profit margins are relatively low compared to if you buy all the sort of the accessories, the extra accessories for a car, then, the margins, the profits start to go up. And maybe utilities could exploit, using smart technologies and meters to be able to offer differentiated service to customers. There's been a lot of discussion, some discussion of the business model, whether utilities should change theirs, the business model. And there's, different viewpoints. One is that maybe they could tweak their business model. Another choice is for them to actually change it. I think the objective, if I were a regulator, I would say, we have these new technologies for customers, and to what extent, if we want to maximize the benefits of these new technologies to customers, does the utility business model have to change? That's sort of the one impetus for New York's RED program, and we won't have time to talk about that. But basically, a business model, there's sort of two main elements. One is trying to get value, maximize value to customers. Okay, and the current business model may not do that. Maybe it needs to be revamped because of these new technologies to maximize value to customers. And the second part, of course, utility needs to make money. For investor-owned utility, you want to be like the post office where you're, constantly losing money. Utilities can't survive in that sort of outcome. So those are sort of the two major I think questions with regard to whether a new business model should be developed. The role of the utility, that's a question under review that gets incorporated into sort of the business model. Should the utility actually provide new services? I mean, that's one way they could exploit and make money, and some utilities are starting to do that, starting to own rooftop, solar and other new technologies. Another role of the utilities is provide new services. All right, customers, want new services, then the utility is there to provide it, and the utility can make money. Sort of the bare bones role of the utility is just do what they're doing now, just provide this delivery service and produce electricity if they're vertically integrated, and and then leave it up to other parties to provide new services and actually for providers to actually benefit to provide a new technology to customers. So there's a lot of ways in which the utilities, and I would think that, given these new technologies, the more progressive, proactive utilities are finding ways, or will be finding ways to exploit these new technologies to their advantage. But as a word of caution for the regulators, when the utilities get involved in these sort of non-core services, then it's important to protect the other customers, the core customers of the utilities, because we've seen too many times in the past where utilities have formed subsidiaries and they do have leverage because they control and own the delivery system to favor their company and be a whole thing at the expense of utility customers through cost shifting and abuses. So I think that's an important point. There was a little discussion yesterday what can we learn from other industries to adapt to new technologies. And there's a bunch of those that were listed, including the post office, cable companies. Actually, when satellite TV came into existence, they had to adapt. People are saying small colleges. A lot of people are saying, because of online courses and for some other reasons, small colleges may close in the future. And companies making mainframe computers. Now, the post office, there was some discussion of that, and certainly the utilities don't want to sort of evolve into what the post office has evolved into. And certainly, the post office revenues have fallen for the reasons given yesterday, because of email and FedEx and UPS. Post office have large fixed costs, pensions, that's a burden on them. There's significant subsidization across customer classes. It's not cost-based. You have inflexible pricing. increasing costs, and essentially a bureaucratic, rigid business model. So, utilities want to study what they don't want to become to avoid, then I think look at the example of certainly the post office. There's, I think, 4 critical questions with regard to new technologies. One is whether they really be disruptive or boutique. Rooftop solar is an example. Like 0.1% of the customers in the country have solar, rooftop solar, half of those are in California. And there's some question of whether, you get the impression sometimes that, in 10, 20 years, half of the, customers will have rooftop solar systems. And I question that, certainly, we don't know. That's one of the points, but that's a question. And other technologies will become more disruptive. I'm not sure, storage, people say could become disruptive too once it becomes economical, but that remains to be seen. Another issue with technology is a time horizon for broad diffusion. As I mentioned before, most technologies take years and years before they become widely diffused, which means that there's less urgency to try to, let's say, promote them through subsidies and other things. Also, I observed that there's different adoption of how states have responded to these new technologies. We've heard from California, and they're the leaders, but most states aren't like California, believe me. Whether that's good or bad, I'm not judging, but I'm saying California is really, for various reasons, have taken the lead in these new technologies. But in most states are, I talked to other states and just waiting. And basically, to wait, to not to be a leader may be rational, all right? Because you could sort of receive the benefits of the states that sort of going ahead with this. New York goes ahead, and then, Hawaii and California, that the other states could learn from their experiences, and they don't have to, be in the forefront. Utilities would unlikely face sort of a death spiral from rooftop solar, other forms of DG. I think there's a tipping point or inflection point on rate increases to non-solar customers beyond which commissions will find acceptable. There's been mention of Hawaii, but last month the Hawaii Commission ruled the abolition of net metering for new customers. There's different interpretations of that decision. One is that the commission it's all like 15% of their customers are converted, and that they saw a lot of cost shifting, and they said, well, that's enough from net metering. Another interpretation, which is more benign and which I don't agree with certainly as much as the other, is that the commission thought that because of the sort of relatively high penetration of solar, that they no longer needs a subsidy, the solar industry. Now, whether other states will follow suit, a lot of states are revisiting net metering. The majority, or at least several states, a large number of states. So that's that way remains to be seen what happens there. Regulation in new technologies. That's sort of an area that hasn't gotten a lot of attention in the literature. Non-regulated firms innovate. They adopt new technologies when the rewards are high relative to the risk. Any innovation has high risk. And the reason firms innovate is the prospects are in high profits, okay? But if you look at the sort of the regulation, traditional regulation, that doesn't exist. Certainly the costs are more socialized, so there's more risk to the utility than in non-regulated industries, but the rewards, just don't seem to correspond. If you're a utility executive, you got two technologies, and one is riskier than the other. And if you happen to, go with the risky technology and there's benefits, as it was successful, most of those benefits are going to go to customers, the way regulation works. So you don't have that incentive, in my opinion, for utilities to adopt, new regulations. And there's different ways you could address that. I mean, it's basically, there's an imbalance, in my opinion, between the risk and the reward relationship. So you either reduce the risk, pre-approval, or I think, more importantly or more effectively is to increase the rewards. If the utility actually has a winner in new technology, they should be able to profit from that. And generally regulation doesn't do that. What was mentioned about barriers to new technologies, I think there needs to be separated between what's called artificial and natural barriers. See, for all technologies, they're all at fault. They're saying, gosh, we face, certain barriers that we need to have favors. I mean, they're opting for favors by the government. And actually, a lot of times these barriers are sort of, they reflect normal market conditions. The new technology may not penetrate because it's new and, there's uncertainty and all of that, and it takes time for, to get mass acceptance. So, I've warned, in several publications or something that, that regulators need to distinguish between the two, because when you try to subsidize or give special treatment to offset a sort of a natural barrier, most times the benefits are less than the cost. They're just, they're not justified. Utilities would tend to underinvest in new technologies for various reasons. I mentioned one. Public benefits. Any firm, whether it's a utility or other firm, when there's public benefits of new technology, let's say in clean environment, firms aren't going to, consider that in their decision making, right? I mean, and rationally so. But like if there's a carbon tax or something, then they would consider certain new technologies to the extent that, the technology would reduce their taxes, but otherwise, the public benefits are not accounted for, and that's why, a lot of times the technologies, that's the role of government to fund these technologies that do have public benefits. In traditional regulation, as I mentioned, two elements, lack of competition in retail markets most. That's, competition is a big driver of innovation. And then the fact that traditional regulation, the prices are tightly controlled based on cost. Book depreciation is another one, because basically that leads to stranded costs. If you have an asset that has a book life of 40 years, and new technology comes along after the 20th year of operation of the facility, then the firm isn't recovering its costs, so it has a disincentive to replace the old investment. So anyways, I think that's, but just one last point, customers. A lot of discussion on customers. They want to be empowered. Customers have changed. I'm not so sure. I mean, a lot of states, utilities have retail competition programs, and the minority of customers participate. So customers have choices, and the vast majority of customers say, I want to stay with my local utility. Now, I think Steve yesterday among his speech indicated that the average electric customer spends like 1.5% of their income on electricity. So, choice, to the extent you can save some costs, even if you say 25% cost, all right, that's only 0.375% of your income. So and there's sort of what's economists call transactions costs too, to convert over that you have to personally. You wonder, how many customers would actually take the opportunity to save money, whether it's retail competition for another electricity provider or another technology. And the probably what's going to develop is you're going to have active customers that will want, a lot of young people, they want choice, they want real-time information, they want green power instead of brown power, and the utility, should, respond to those customers. But the other customers, which could be a majority, would just, again, want reliable service at affordable price. So with that, I'll end and
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
It is a late hour, but you're a most dedicated audience. We're going to have a quick round of questions. Questions? Should I start? I'll start with Tom. It's a nice idea to have all these new reactors, but do you have customers? I don't know of anybody lined up demanding a new reactor. It's sort of the old better mousetrap's great idea, but you better find somebody with a mouse problem.
China's got a mouse problem, and they plan to have as many reactors built by the middle of the century as the United States produces from all sources of electricity today. They basically want to do what France did. And they obviously have a great motivation because of their air quality. If a reactor system like the Thorcon reactors can be sold for $400 a kilowatt or even $2,000 a kilowatt, you will see people lining up. Because of the regulatory system in the United States, the U.S. would not be the first in line because the NRC would have to certify the design, and they don't even have people at the NRC that are qualified to evaluate a design of a reactor like that.
So it's a totally overseas play. Steve, in California, we had a point. I remember being lectured by the chairman of the commission on how the California deregulation system was going to be perfect. It had price caps, everybody was taking down, and California was gained and everything else stopped. How confident are you that some other similar disaster theoretical schemes have run into practical reality?
So this is a challenge, clearly. And interestingly enough, not one based in many of the markets. There are plenty of other deregulated markets where customer choice is available. California just blew it, basically, in a nutshell. And we're still paying for it, actually. I don't know whether any of you remember this, but in the energy crisis, there was this huge spike in the wholesale price of electricity, and the government and the legislature just wouldn't allow those prices to be immediately reflected in rates. So the Department of Water Resources, which does what you might think they do, had the bonding authority, and they went out and borrowed a huge amount of money to pay the bill, the short-term bill for the rest of us. So we've been paying off that bill for the last 15 years. In our electricity bills, there's a DWR charge on everybody's electricity bill. So that's about to expire, which would be nice. But I was just at a meeting with the president of the Public Utilities Commission yesterday, and that question came up about why are we not moving towards more customer choice and direct access, and he basically just said non-started politically. So that's not going to happen again in very, very long time. There is a bill pending in the legislature that got sidetracked this last session. We have a 2-year session in California, so we still have another session to go to get it passed. But it would open up direct access to people who want 100% renewable energy, which is a huge issue in California. Actually, there are a number of companies, and you talk about customers, there are customers on the commercial industrial side of the ledger that really do care. They have sustainability goals, and they really do care what the energy mix is. And they want 100% renewable energy, and there's a lot of things standing in the way of them getting there. So there was a bill pending, and it almost got out, but our dear friends at the IDW managed to sneak in a little bit of an amendment in there that required that you can have direct access, but only if every physical piece of equipment from the lines all the way down to a customer meter is owned and serviced by utilities. And so that one's dead in the water for right now, but we may manage to resurrect that one this year. So I think that the quick answer to your question is it can happen.
Your I guess listeners on your webinars, are they clamoring for anything? 14,000 pairs of ears you have. Are they jumping up and down and saying solar now, or are they saying nuclear now, or are they saying none of the above now?
Actually, I don't think so. I think because electricity isn't high enough, or there'd be a big clamor among the population. And a lot of the falling out, actually most of the falling out have is professionals. So they're looking for ways to get into the business and looking for business tips. And that's why they come to the sessions. We do have a very big municipal officials, and I actually don't hear a big clamor there either. So I think
that's very interesting. There are a lot of people who would like to get into the utility space in some way as a provider of services or something more, a seller of electricity. What do you divide?
in terms of getting in.
Yeah, people want to get in.
Well, I think there are points of entry into the marketplace. Mainly, there's consulting, there's new technologies, there's decision processes, as I put up there, the IT side of it. I mean, there's lots of entries for new for companies to come into the business, both on the demand side and on the utility side, and lots of opportunities for innovation, especially if you break it down into the elements of, on the demand side and also on the generation side to get really granular and specific on those needs. And, you know, we are seeing that to say companies coming up all the time with technologies that are really pretty far advanced, especially on the IT and communication side of the business.
And Ken, the National Association of Utilities is a very important body, but they are not unified, are they? They don't take common positions, do they? Or to what extent are their positions common on these issues?
Definitely, they're not common, and I think it's good because we do have a federalist system in this country. In the states, I mean, the positions, they're rational because they're conditions, the politics, economic conditions, and other factors sort of play into, how they're going to, what the commission's going to do. Like in Arizona here, you got sort of, it's kind of interesting. You got the environmentalists and the Tea Party sort of, agreeing on an issue which is very unusual. It used to be sort of the old adage in economics, the Baptists and the bootleggers both have the same, objective to not have booze on Sunday certainly for different reasons. So, and I think that's good. That's the strength of neighborhood is the diversity of views that commissions take. And they do have civil discourse. It's amazing. It's not most times it's not partisan, politics. It's just that their situations, circumstances differ, and they're acting sort of rationally in response to that.
Okay, do we have any questions from the audience? Going on. That concludes our session. I want to thank this panel in particular because it's very difficult to be the last panel of the day, and there's no solution to that problem except to be much nicer to you next time and put you in prime time. It's the old story about the caboose is always the most damaged car in a train wreck. And somebody said, well, let's just not have a caboose. Now I'm with Amtrak trains and I see there's no caboose and I move up. It's been a very special 2 days, I think you might agree. I'd like to thank everybody who helped me, particularly Joe Paparella, a very distinguished and very able publisher of Public Utilities Fortnightly. His editor, Ken Silverstein, Mario Reva, who has done the streaming and will be working on some of the video stuff we hope to get out of it, who works with me. So my IT right hand, being as I have no right hand IT, I'm very left-handed about it. And particularly those of you who came, participated, listened, and in some cases paid. We're so glad. Thank you all very much, and I wish you all good luck. Some of these things that have been said here are very important. Yesterday, when I was talking with Owen Stelzer, we talked about the value of the work we do on related town planning. So the same thing to do today. I think that's very important. I like to meet people with little funny
So I have two from Churchill. One he stole from somebody else, which was, "It is dangerous to jump a chasm in 2 bounds." So when you're introducing these new technologies, bear that in mind. And if you don't introduce these two technologies, this one I think is original to Churchill. It said, "A decision not taken is nonetheless a decision." So there you are. Thank you. Good luck. Godspeed to you all.
That's the end of this whole thing.
Steal the show. Oh, there we go.
I just did that for the magic effect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. See you tomorrow morning, or?
I think so.
All right.
If you need me, call me. What time assembly? What time's that flight?
Like 6:45 or something. So we'll be up bright and early. Yeah.
I always get up a little early. I remember what tomorrow.
Yeah. It's like something. It's like 6:47 or something. What? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think a little less than half an hour. I actually right now. So, you know, it doesn't seem like, you know, there's no traffic jam, so it's,